After uploading the video I made a few days ago regarding the Flat Earth discovery in the movie titled The Ming Hags that was released back in 2009, I was contacted by the producer, Joe Franz himself, and we had an exchange. Basically, it was an impromptu interview over Skype. And it wasn't just regarding the Flat Earth topic, it's also talked about the fake moon landings, the hoax moon landings as well. I'm sure many will have their own preconceived notions about Joe Franz, since he basically has done work through the mainstream outlets, mainstream media, such as MTV, National Geographic, History Channel, Animal Planet Discovery, Sony 3Net, True TV, Spike, Destination America, and so forth. So again, a lot of people are going to have their preconceived notion on what he's all about, but definitely do not judge a book by its cover. He has a lot of interesting things to say, and for a lot of truth seekers, it's going to be a very interesting listen.
I first heard about Russian vids from his videos on YouTube. I'm always very interested in what is commonly referred to as conspiracy theory. I'm a type of person. I'm into all kinds of stuff, and I'm not a big mainstream media guy, so I get a lot of my information from the internet, from alternative news sources. So that's the first thing that turned me on to Russian vids. And lo and behold, I saw that he had made a video about me one day, and about this movie that I had produced called Ming Hags, which was directed by Bam Margera and starred a lot of the guys from the CKY/Jackass crew. And the video snippet that he had drawn attention to was a scene that we had done for the film called Ming Hags, and it took place in a classroom, and the scene featured me playing the part of a teacher as a little cameo role, which are fun to do, and with Mark the Bagger from the Howard Stern Show and from the Bloodhound Gang and Jimmy Pop Ali fame and all that stuff. And so this was an independent film, and it was financed out of Bam Margera's own pocket. And it was all shot on Super 16 millimeter film, and it was very, very expensive. And we were always looking for ways to offset costs. So we went around to all the local colleges, and we asked them if we could film the scene in one of their classrooms, so that we didn't have to make some fake-looking classroom film set in one of our friends' houses or something like that. As I said, it was an independent film, low budget, but still very expensive when it's coming out of your friend's pocket. So we went to one of the schools who were willing to let us film there, and they were excited because it was an independent film and all this stuff. And we scouted the location, and it looked perfect. And out in the parking lot, there were two gentlemen, very well spoken, moderately dressed, suit jackets, that kind of a thing. And they were asking us what we were filming, because they saw some of the camera equipment and all that stuff. And we described to them what we were filming, and they said, well, how much does it cost to film a scene like this? And I said, it costs about $1,200 for covering the cost of the film and the actors and the extras and all that stuff. It was a relatively very small scene. And at first I thought they were the faculty of the college. So I was on my best behavior, trying not to downplay. I was trying to downplay the fact that, this is a silly film. As you put it in your video, it's kind of for knuckleheads. And I didn't take that as an insult, because look at what Jackass and the various spin-offs are. We're all a bunch of knuckleheads. That's what we do. It's fun.
Yeah.
And so one of the guys said, well, what would you say if we paid for your day to film here? And I said, so you're going to give us $1,200, which I really appreciated, but I didn't know what they wanted in return. I had thought maybe they wanted their kid to have a little cameo in the scene or something like that. And I said, well, what do you want in return for the money? Because nothing in the world is free. And they said, well, we want to help you art direct the room. So automatically I'm thinking, okay, the guy has a wife who maybe wants to be an art director or a designer, and she wants to come make some little touches on the room. So I said, okay, you had a deal, and being in show business, I've had larger offers for a lot stranger things than $1,200 for someone to be able to art direct the room. So when we came in to film, um, I couldn't. I'm looking around the room and I'm like, well, there's nothing different about this room. I said, what did you do? And they pointed to the blackboard. They said, we just made some diagrams on the blackboard. Just make sure that shows up in one of your shots. Mm-hmm. And that's really all there was to. And for your listeners, the diagram was a picture of the Earth as it appears on the United Nations flag next to a square. Now, at the time, on YouTube and stuff, there was no flat Earth theory to speak of. No one was really talking about it, and I had never heard. Of course, in history class and science class, we always heard that people used to believe that Earth was flat. But looking at the round Earth on that, I didn't know that there was the flat Earth theory, right? That wasn't a thing back then. So I didn't think anything of it until I saw your video, and I recalled the strange story of how that image came to be. Mm-hmm. And I don't, a lot of people might look at that scene and say, oh, Bam Margera's in touch with the Illuminati and all that stuff, and it was nothing anything like that, but it was very strange as to how these guys were willing to give us $1,200, which was our cost to film the scene, to have that image on the film.
Mm-hmm. I find it very interesting. Like I mentioned in the video where it says Science 101, and what is depicted, looks exactly like the flat Earth model. So it's just, and then I connected all with the other movies like Back to the Future, I, Robot, Catwoman. It's, you see a pattern there. So, I believe what you're saying is, you're saying this is basically a coincidence. In your situation, what is depicted on the chalkboard has nothing to do with
I've never seen these guys before that time, and I never saw them since.
Okay.
And I don't know how they knew we were there, but I will say this: why would someone pay you $1,200 to have that image in a film? Right? And they knew the nature of the film because I told them what the scene was. So maybe there's something to this. I never thought about it till I saw your video, and then I thought of that very strange story. Who would pay someone that kind of money to have this image in a movie that they knew would go out to a demographic of people who don't really think about that type of imagery? Maybe they intended it to be some kind of subliminal message. I don't know. It is very strange.
So bottom line is, what it all comes down to is you had no part of that whatsoever. It's just, these people, it was out of your hands, and it was presented by people, and you just filmed it as is with that background. Because the thing that really gets me, it's not just a flat Earth model. It's you have the square there as well, and side by side, it's very elaborate how the chalkboard is. You have the square. And it's really well done. It's not like it was, some work was put into it. It wasn't just, on a whim or something. So it was definitely planned and for this presentation for sure.
And what is the significance of the square in relation to the flat Earth theory?
Well, the whole thing is it's biblical, where there's, in the Bible it states basically there's, four corners of the earth. Like in pro wrestling, Vince McMahon or Gorilla Monsoon would say the squared circle. So the concept of the flat Earth, where how the sun revolves around the flat Earth, and you're going to make an ice ring, basically, with the circular motion of the sun. And, the sun, that circular, the circle of the flat Earth is within the square of the four corners. That's a biblical reference.
I see.
What it comes down to.
Now, I will say this. This is very interesting now. Let's really get into this. I don't believe the Earth is flat. I don't believe it's round. I've seen not enough evidence for either one. However, what makes the flat Earth theory extremely interesting is, I've been up in, hundreds of airplane trips, and I have never seen the curvature of the Earth.
Neither.
Now, And I've been over mountains, I've been over deserts, I've been over rainforests, I've been over oceans. I've never seen it. I've always expected one day to go high enough to see a curvature. I never have. So some people say, well, I've seen it in pictures, but you have to understand the way a lens works.
Yeah.
Is if you use a wide angle lens, it will distort reality and there will be a curvature. For example, if you've used a GoPro and you've seen what you shoot through a GoPro lens, everything looks curved.
Yeah,
through
fisheye lens.
Yeah.
Fisheye lens,
so that's what a lot of people don't understand.
Yeah.
So, but I'm going to lay something on you. And if you're listening to this, and again, I can't stress this enough. I don't believe the earth is flat. I don't believe it's round. I'm ambivalent either way, but here's what's interesting. Okay, so if you're listening to this, you have been to the ocean and you have seen a sailboat, and here's how you know the earth is round. You've seen a sailboat go out to the horizon, and slowly the sailboat sinks and the bottom disappears from view, and slowly the sail sinks down over the horizon till you can no longer see it, and that's your proof the earth is round. Now, I'm going to tell you, if you've seen that with your own eyes, you are brainwashed because you haven't seen it. Now, I want you to think about this. You have to understand, the horizon is 26 miles away. Okay? You cannot see for 26 miles. You might be able to see a mile away. You might be able to see 2 miles away. There's no way you're going to see an object, especially a sailboat, 26 miles away. Now, why do you think you've seen that? I want you to go to Google, and I want you to bring up Google Images and Russian Vids. You can add these images to this audio as you like. It might be very helpful for your viewers.
Okay.
But the images you'll see are diagrams of the sailboat going over the edge of the earth. And it slowly disappears. Now, you've seen this image in so many science books and in so many science documentaries. You think you've seen it, but you haven't. So there's proof that anyone can be brainwashed in the most subliminal ways. So I think that is very interesting. Now, the question is, why would people lie about the earth being round when it is flat?
I made a video where these people were out in the ocean, and they had a Nikon P900 digital camera, and you could see the sun looking like it's beyond the horizon, and you only see basically, what is it, half of the sun, because it looks like it's around the so-called ball Earth. But they zoom in with this P900 digital camera, and all of a sudden, what do you see as they zoom in? You see the full sun, completely above the horizon. It's all about perspective. Just like when you're looking at telephone poles, when you're looking down the street, where they're all the same height, but the one furthest away looks like the legs are missing, but it's not. It's just about perspective.
Okay, so yeah, and that is a very interesting point. I mean, optically, when you zoom in with a lens or a digital zoom, you get a whole new perspective. And you're right, it is all about perspective. But there is another theory about why people would lie about the Earth being round. Okay, so let's take the current map of the Earth of the continents that we know about, and that are already mapped, that have been explored. Now you take those, and which is a flat map, and you wrap it around the globe. So now anyone would feel confined to the globe, and now the idea that there's any other land now goes away, because it's a way to hide other land. Now the theory goes, and again, I don't necessarily believe this is true, but it is extremely interesting. The theory goes that if you no longer confine yourself to a globe where there is a limited amount of land, and you keep traveling in all directions, there's more land. Now, the theory goes that there is, out of the range of the sun, there is a lot of ice. which collectively becomes Antarctica, right? But if you get beyond the ice, there are other suns, and there is other moons, and there is other land masses, and the land is infinite. It keeps going. There are more trees, there are more resources, there is more coal, there is more gold, there are more animals. Why would this be hidden from us? Well, if people realize there's other land to be settled, they would go there. And they would no longer be under the tight fist of a global government. Now, that is very interesting. Again, I don't believe it's true or not true, but it is very interesting to entertain. I forget the fella's name who did the Antarctic expeditions. He said that he found trees.
Admiral Byrd. Sorry, Joe. That's Admiral Byrd. Yes, Admiral Byrd.
Yeah, and his interviews are extremely interesting. He says the amount of resources that he found just in Antarctica were incredible. And if you could find a way to sustain life and get through the cold, you could live there. And of course, he never made it too far into the Antarctic. But the theory goes that if you get beyond all that ice, there's other suns and there's other life-sustaining systems and other land masses which could sustain life. And I think that's very interesting to think about, even if from just a science fiction perspective. So that said, let's talk about one other thing which I find very interesting. Okay, so we've all heard people expound on their theories as to why it's impossible to get men on the moon, and even more impossible to get them off the moon and return them to safety to the Earth. We've had people pick apart the videos of the lunar landings. For example, the slow motion technique that's used. If you speed the video up 50%, they are now in the physical realm of Earth. It looks exactly the same as someone jumping around on Earth. Now, again, I know there's gravitational differences, but here's what's interesting. If you look at the gravity, if the gravity is less on the moon, why do they move slower? Wouldn't you be able to move faster because your muscles are 50% more effective towards the low gravity?
Yes.
That's interesting. Okay, but that's neither here nor there. Because I don't know, there are physical properties on other planets and stuff which are immeasurable. I get that, but here's something that I'm going to tell you as a video guy. Here's why I believe that the lunar landing was faked. Because there is no way you can have a power source that strong at that time in history, and there's no way you could transmit that video signal all the way to Earth. Absolutely 100% not. Let me tell you something. I have if I have a handheld video camera and I want, and let's say I'm shooting a scene and the producer wants to see what I'm shooting. So they have a transmitter in their hand and they have a battery on my camera. The battery that I have is about the size of a brick. It's more square, but it's about the same mass as a brick. And it only lasts for maybe an hour and a half. And that signal only goes a couple hundred feet. Now you're going to tell me that on that teeny little spaceship with that teeny little camera, they're going to have enough power to transmit a full color video signal all the way down to Earth. And I can also tell you this, that when they promised a full color video signal, the station that broadcasted the lunar landing, they were pissed because they weren't getting raw video feed. What they were getting was called a kineoscope. And for those of you who don't know what that is, that was an editing process used up until the late 1990s. And I've actually seen the kineoscope technology and utilized it when I worked in a film lab, and it's very interesting. Basically, it's an editing tool. So you have a screen, basically it's a television screen, and you shoot that with a film camera. So now it's on 16 millimeter film. So what they did with those videos, in theory, why you see a black and white image of the lunar landing, although they claim the full color videos exist, was what NASA says they did was transmitted the full color video signal, filmed it on a kinescope, black and white on 16 millimeter film, and then released that to the networks. So therefore, it was not a live event, because to get film processed, it takes hours, and it's a whole process that generally takes about 6 hours to complete, even with the most efficient film laboratories. So why would they get this crappy, grainy, black and white film image when they could have broadcasted color, which at the time the networks were pissed that they didn't have the ability to do, that NASA denied them? But anyway, that's neither here nor there. The whole kinescope thing, that's a side note. My thing is, there is no way with that technology and with batteries being as big and as weak and as heavy as they were, you could have broadcast that signal from the moon. Impossible.
Good info. Good info. One thing I want to mention, Joe, is before discussing the moon, what I believe what the whole moon hoax was about, getting back to what you're saying about Admiral Byrd and exploring beyond the ice ring.
Having been up in hundreds of airplane trips and never seen the curvature of the Earth, and knowing that with the diagrams that we've been told, with the sailboat going over the horizon, these images that we think we've seen, this proof, everyone has seen a distorted image taken with a bubble lens where we can see the curvature of the Earth, knowing that I have never seen this, and the sailboat going over the horizon where the bottom of the boat disappears, followed by the sail, knowing that that's 26 miles away and physically impossible to see, it makes me fascinated by the fact that there is no evidence that I can tell that the Earth is indeed round. And I don't discount that it's round, but I don't discount that it's flat. But
there's no evidence. I'm sorry, Joe. There's no evidence besides what they tell us in the indoctrination centers throughout this, not only this country, the world. There's no evidence. Just like there's no evidence we're supposedly spinning. Well, you're sitting in your chair right now. We're supposedly spinning, well, at the equator actually, at 1,100 miles an hour, while traveling supposedly through space, orbiting around the sun at nearly 70,000 miles an hour. So we don't feel it. We don't sense it. Give us a reason to believe what they tell us.
Well, the theory is that since centrifugal force, we're all moving at the same speed. That's why when we jump, the Earth, in the round Earth theory, the Earth is moving essentially a mile a second. So when we jump, we should land a mile away. But since the theory is that we are all glued to the same centrifugal force, so when we jump, we are spinning at the same rotation, which those laws of physics also apply when you're high in the air in an airplane, which doesn't make sense. I'll tell you other things that don't really make sense that people blindly believe is black hole theory. No one's ever seen a black hole.
Yeah.
There's no proof that any of them exist. And of course, the black hole is how you get the Big Bang. So the theory is that the lack of matter nothingness becomes so dense that it explodes, and matter is created through the denseness of nothingness. That's essentially what a black hole is.
Yeah.
Which makes how is there nothing that becomes something out of denseness of nothingness?
I'm going to interrupt you there, Joe. I don't know if you see my video with the quotes from William Shatner. He's said it several times. He was asked, what's the difference between science and science fiction? He says that they're both the same.
How do you balance science with science fiction?
They're both the same. The mystery of science fiction is what I'm talking about. Science and science fiction are essentially the same.
Thank you very much.
He talked about having this conversation with Michio Kaku and telling him they had a debate about this. Because how do you know all this stuff? He goes, oh, it's in my head. That's what he said that Michio Kaku told him. But taking one step back, I'm sorry to derail this, but real quick, when you talk about how the atmosphere supposedly moves with the Earth as it spins, But what about satellites that are supposedly in the vacuum of space? How are they moving along with the so-called ball Earth as it's traveling at nearly 70,000 miles an hour? And we'll get back to your point about the black holes. I just want to ask you what your thoughts on that.
No. I agree with that 100%. And I'll give you something else. One time I was on Mount Fuji, and I was filming something there for some sports commercial I won't get into, but we end up in Japan on Mount Fuji, and it's not like it is in any other place in the world, because you see, shooting stars, meteors coming into the earth and bursting into flames once they enter the atmosphere. You see one of those about every 7 seconds. Okay, so with the number of meteors that big that we can actually see, how big are all these small little pebbles floating around in space? Why are the satellites never hit? Why are the space shuttles and anyone orbiting the Earth in any kind of spacecraft, why are they never hit by a tiny little pebble? Yeah. There's millions of these things entering our atmosphere, and even more millions around us. Why are they never hit? That's very interesting.
Well, I find it interesting. You mentioned space shuttles. I've made many videos on space shuttles being nothing more than airplanes. It's nothing more than a production where basically you have a rocket launch at Cape Canaveral, and basically these rockets just go into the ocean, and we never see, these so-called, these space shuttles actually physically going into space. All we say, they tell us, it's going around the so-called ball Earth, but no one ever sees it. No one ever records the so-called space shuttles going into space. All we see is from the vantage point from Florida. But getting back to the whole point of how it's all basically like a Hollywood production, then you, out of nowhere, say weeks later or months later, you see the space shuttle coming back to Earth, and all you see is basically the space shuttle coming in for a landing just like an airplane. And they have the chaser planes coming in alongside, and that's to cover the fact that they have jet engines, because supposedly these space shuttles disperse all their fuel on takeoff. They have no jet fuel whatsoever, so they're coming in supposedly after dropping like a rock out of space. They come in for a landing. It's on a spinning ball, so it's completely ridiculous.
Well, if you think that's crazy, I want anyone to, after you're done listening to this, go and look at NASA's videos that they put out in the 1980s of people cruising around on those space shuttles and everything with their hair spray, with this hairspray, trying to make it look like it's no gravity, and their hair is flying around. It is so bad.
I have that.
It's like they took the worst stylist in the world, sprayed, put hairspray all in their hair and tried to stick it up. It looks so bad. The production quality is, and they tried so hard to make it look legitimate, but it's entirely unbelievable in today's standards with how sophisticated the viewing audiences are.
Let me tell you something, Joe, real quick. It's funny you mentioned that. Sorry to cut you off, but I actually uploaded a video recently where they're doing this, supposed, interview with someone on Earth, a newscaster, and he says, "You guys really in space? It looks too clear. Is this a hoax?" And then there's a female talking exactly what you just mentioned about the hair up, and it's completely, you can tell she's using Aquanet or whatever hairspray they have, and she's pointing at her hair, and it's completely ridiculous. And then the guy does a spin proving he's supposed in outer space, and the guy next to him tugs on what looks like a wire, and they're basically just, what I believe, they're upside down, and they got harnesses. But I'm sorry to cut you off on that. I just want to mention that you just mentioned that, and I actually covered it just a couple of days ago in a previous video.
Yeah, I mean, it's laughable what is, tried to pass off as, and what's so great now about YouTube and about these video platforms is, back in the day, you got one shot to see this stuff on television, and that was it. I mean, you believed it was true. You saw it once. Maybe you saw it on a rerun. Maybe on the other news channel they would rerun some of this footage. But now it's all been released, and people have the ability to look at it and to pick it apart and to really think about it. Like we talked earlier about the lunar landing. Well, now that people have the technology at their fingertips on their laptops to be able to speed up the lunar landing footage. You have the land rover going around, and you have the guys hopping around in slow motion. Speed that up 200%, and it looks like they went out in the desert and filmed, and even the little things where the shadows. Okay, so in filmmaking, we have what's known as 3-point lighting. You have 3 light sources illuminating an object. There are 3 shadows on those objects on the moon. You have 3 shadows going in 3 different directions. The only way you get that is if you have 3 light sources. It's not. I've heard other filmmakers trying to debunk this, say, well, it's really an optical illusion and reflections off of objects on the moon. I said, you know what? Have you ever filmed something with 1 light source and got 3 shadows? And they shut the hell up because they know I'm right. You can't get 3 shadows from 1 light source. It's impossible.
Yeah, they're not gonna. Well, they'll probably just say, "Oh, there's mirrors on the moon." that's the only. Of course, obviously they don't. But yeah, that's a great point. One thing I want to mention real quick.
Russian Viz, what's your theory on? You mentioned earlier something about you had a theory on the about why you would fake a lunar landing. What now? I can think of a point where, the Russians in 1957, October 4th, had Sputnik, and they had a satellite, and we had to outdo them by putting a man on the moon. I get that as a motivation as to why we would accelerate our space program and even go to the lengths of faking a lunar landing to outdo the Russians. But what is your theory?
My theory is it's all about the ball Earth. It wasn't about going to the moon. It was about getting a full supposed image of the ball Earth. It's a subconscious type of programming. Just like when you watch any type of documentary on TV, History Channel, when they show, for example, when you had one of these construction workers going up the trade tower, and you see the so-called horizon all curved from the fisheye lens camera. So while you're watching a documentary, you're subconsciously being programmed by this false curve, creating the false reality. So again, getting back to the so-called ball Earth, in all these years, we only have 2 supposed photos in all these years, going back to Apollo 17, back in 1973, and then back in 2015 with another supposed image or supposed photo of the ball Earth, and it just so happened to have sex on it. When you flip over the so-called ball Earth, there's the sex symbolism. Like I say, they're called the Illuminati for a reason. They're illuminated and they're naughty. And by the way, just for a reference, I talk about on my channel about the occult of 33, the highest degree in the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. It just so happens the record for by astronauts to be on the moon, supposedly walking on the moon, is 33 hours. So you always have the occultic numbers associated with all these hoaxes and saps, such as hoax shootings and whatnot. Just like the Twin Towers, the construction of the Twin Towers started in 1968. They came down in 2001, exactly 33 years. The same year, 1968, was the same year that the 9/11 calling system, the universal calling system, went into play in Haleyville, Alabama. So it's all about the occult with everything. Just like
okay, no, wait. Here's what I need to know.
Yeah.
Okay, so I can appreciate the symbolism through numbers.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I hate is I forget the guy's name, but he puts out these videos where all he does is the numbers. It gets so boring. But
yeah.
But here's what I want to know.
Yeah.
If these quote conspiracies are encoded with these numbers, what is the point of why would people purposely throw in these the numbers, the 33,
yeah,
why would they do this?
Well, let me say this, and I'm glad you asked. You're talking about Zachary K. Hubbard, and he goes overboard. Like he thinks that every single freaking play on a football field is scripted. Every single player is in the know, and he goes overboard. See, he's making the numbers look ridiculous, and I believe he's an agent, and there's truth in the numbers, but he brings to the point where it's completely ridiculous. There are numbers. You got your 33s, your 44, and your 777. Just like, for example, CNN, they're located on the 33rd parallel. The supposed UFO crash of Roswell is on the 33rd parallel. So you have all these numbers associated with so many events, just like Bill Clinton changes his name from Bill Blythe to get Clinton to get 33. Just like I made a video just today about Sirhan, who supposedly assassinated Robert Kennedy. Sirhan is 33, so you get your dual 33s, and Robert's 33, so is Kennedy. So, there are the 33s, but it's when people like Zach make videos, and I'll tell you right now, Zach is really good with the numbers, but he goes way too far, and he just basically discredits himself when he's called, he goes way too far with it, and it makes it seem ridiculous with all these numbers he's putting together. It's like he's pulling them out of thin air. But you are going to have your numbers in there, but it's when you go overboard with it. When I make videos, I'll cover the numbers, but I'll show video footage to go along to prove my point when it comes to, say, a shooting hoax or a psyop. But I'm not going to just sit there for half an hour and just throw numbers at you and, oh, this guy's birthday was on this date and it connects with this date. It's just a bunch of rubbish.
But let's say these Illuminati, this global apparatus of Illuminati is, I don't know, faking events or whatever. Why would they purposefully put in numbers like 33 into like a parallel where an event took place, or 33 minutes on the moon? Why? What is their purpose for that?
It's basically their signature. This is our, like, after a painter is done painting his portrait or picture, I should say, he's going to put his little signature on it. And
it's like a director like Alfred Hitchcock having a cameo in his film, is what you're saying.
Yes, it's exactly.
Okay, so I just want to get something clear that we talked about a little bit earlier. We got off track. Was when you talked about people's motivation for faking a moon landing. Again, one of the theories is that we wanted to outdo the Russians. Another reason is that I've heard is that we wanted, the United States wanted to be able to tax our citizens a little bit more for NASA in order to kind of launder money for our government, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know what the motivation would have been if the lunar landings were a hoax, but you say that it was an underhanded way just to facilitate this image of the ball Earth. So, in other words, a magician will do the trick in one hand while waving the other hand in front of your face. So, in other words, what you're saying is our motivation for faking moon landing was under the guise of beating the Russians to the moon, but really what we wanted to do was say, that's what the Earth looks like from the moon. You see, it's round in a subliminal way. Is that what you were saying?
Absolutely. And also, it needs to be understood as well as Russia and the U.S., the whole Cold War was a fake beef. These are all Masons. The world's a stage, and all these governments are one working together.
And okay, so what else is really interesting, too, is that, for 100 years, we have learned that there are 9 planets, right? And we have, they've left it to us to believe this wholeheartedly because scientists have told us there are 9 planets. Now, a couple years back, I think 3 years ago or so, they tell us, by the way, there's no planet Pluto. What do you mean there's no planet Pluto? I thought you said there was a planet Pluto. They say, well, we were never really sure what it was. Well, what are you saying? Is it a block of ice? What about it doesn't qualify as a planet? Is it a mass of gases? No, it's not a mass of gas. Well, is it a block of ice? Well, no, it's not necessarily a block of ice. Well, what was it that you mistook for a planet? We're not really sure. It could be nothing.
No.
Well, wait a minute. So, there is nothing that you mistook for a planet? That really shook me up to the fact that these scientists that we are supposed to put all of our trust and faith in don't have any idea what the hell they're talking about. What about nothingness qualified as a planet? We're not sure what it is. You're not sure what is. What was it that you mistook for a planet? Yes. We're not sure. It could be nothing. What? It doesn't make any sense. That's why I don't put a lot of stock in what is presented to us as scientific truth. Again, with the black hole theory, you know that there's a black hole because you can do a math problem. That's it. That's your evidence. Some guy sat and did a math problem. And because of the numbers, we know there's black holes.
Yeah.
Even though no one's ever seen one, even though there's not evidence that one ever existed, that doesn't make sense. That's why I don't, again, hold a lot of stock in blind, the blind acceptance of what is presented to us as truth.
Science is religion when it comes down to, not questioning science. Just, that's what they say, so it must be true. Just like I said earlier with William Shatner saying, science and science fiction, they're the same. And this is the mockery where someone, like Gene Roddenberry was a Mason and William Shatner being in Hollywood for the longest time talking about, it's mockery saying someone that, was part of this show where you go into different planets, different worlds, is saying science and science fiction are all the same. They're going to give you truth when it comes to these entertainers, but the scientists are going to lie to you. So no one's going to take an actor, like for all these entertainers coming out saying the earth is flat, it's true, but no one's going to take him seriously. George Carlin telling the absolute truth about the rig system, but who's going to believe him? Because, he's just a comedian. So it's the world of opposites. We give you, I said it a million times, we're going to give you truth in movies and lies in the news. And that's what it all comes down to.
Okay, so you have an atheist, right? Your atheist will laugh at, let's say, a Christian or a Jewish guy or a Muslim, and your atheist will challenge the religions by saying, ha ha ha, you believe that there's an old man in the sky with a magic wand and a beard, and he controls the universe, and he controls life and controls destiny. Ha ha ha, you're so primitive. Well, yet, the same guy will blindly believe a scientist just because he has submitted his intelligence to being inferior to that of a scientist. And what is a scientist? Okay, so someone who's religious, whether you're Jewish or you're Christian or you're Muslim, you essentially believe that God created the world and the universe, right? But what do you believe if you're an atheist and you've submitted to science? What you believe is that in the beginning there was nothing, which is what religions believe. In the beginning there was nothing, and then God, if you're religious, you believe that God created something out of nothing. Well, if you're an atheist, you believe that a black hole created something out of nothing. Like if you're a scientist, an atheist, you literally believe that in the beginning there was nothing, because matter doesn't come from nothing, right? Matter must have a some kind of measurable beginning. So your theory is that the nothingness became so dense in the form of a black hole that it blew up and became matter. That's what you believe? You believe that nothingness becomes so dense that it becomes matter and atoms? What? What?
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense. That makes less sense than that there was a God that turned that created matter from nothingness. That actually makes less sense. So it's what I take away from all this, from our conversation, is that I think people should be less submissive and approach science with more questions than beliefs. Let's scrap this idea that these guys are smart. They have the college degrees. They know what they're talking about. I must agree with whatever they say or I will look like a fool. Well,
yeah.
Maybe you'll look like less of a fool if you begin questioning what we are led to believe is truth. And in the end, maybe you might learn nothing, but maybe you might come out of it with a little bit more inquisitive mind, which might help you in everyday life.
Critical thinking.
Yep, critical thinking, and that's a very valuable skill in dealing with things like your occupation and your job, or how you approach your work day and your relationships. In all aspects of life, critical thinking is so important, and I think it's an exercise of the mind that people don't take advantage of on a daily basis.
Well said. Very well said. And, one thing I want to mention, too, when it comes to the school textbooks, these teachers must teach directly from the school textbooks if they agree with it or not. And have any of these teachers that teach that we live on a ball Earth, have they ever been in space, or supposedly been in space and seen the ball Earth? They're just going along with the program. They know what they know their job. And their job is to, to teach out of the textbook. When it comes to the churches, which gets a little bit more complex, where they don't teach directly out of the Bible. They're going to skip through pages, give stories, and they don't tell the biblical truth, like where it states in Jeremiah 10 about the Christmas tree is being forbidden. Do not cut the tree from the forest and line it with silver and gold. What do the churches do? They teach their, the congregation to do that. So you have the world of opposites in this mockery where people go to church and they're deceived, and you have people that go to school and they're deceived as well. And I talk about this in my videos as well. When you wear the graduation cap, you're wearing basically a mason's mortar, and it's basically all symbolizes how they're shaping and forming your mind. And you see a lot of celebrities such as, say, Bill Cosby and Ben Affleck, and the list goes on and on. You see the photos, and they don't wear the flat mortar hat. That's for the indoctrinated masses. They wear the rounded hats. And you'll see that with Oprah Winfrey and Bono. The list goes on and on. It's for the masses. It's basically, when you graduate, it's basically stating you have been indoctrinated into our system of lies. And now your job is to get a job after you get in debt with school, to get a job, and then buy that house with the white picket fence, get married, and, you just live your slave life working 9 to 5, like Al Bundy or one of these people you see on TV that you can relate to. That's why people love watching Al Bundy marry with children, because they can relate to him. So that's the world we live in. This is basically a slave world run by those that are pulling the strings from behind the scenes. That's what it all comes down to.
Well, that was very poignant, and yeah, I agree, and I think that whether you're an atheist, whether you're religious, whether you believe in a flat Earth or a ball Earth, whether you believe man has been in a space or not, again, critical thinking. That's what I take away from all this is, you have to be your own person, and you're never going to reach your fullest intellectual potential by pointing at a religious figure and saying this person knows everything, by pointing at a scientist and say this person knows everything. No one knows everything. We all have a lot to learn, and please keep an open mind.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. And one thing I want to mention too is, again, when it comes to the churches, specifically the televangelists, is you'll see all the Masonic hand signs, just like all the politicians. That's why the churches are tax exempt. They're basically, this is what I really want to mention. With all these events happening around the world, these televangelists don't speak upon them. So again, that's how they control, the people that watch the mainstream media, people that attend churches. This is how they control the entire matrix.
Well said. And Russian Vids, it was a pleasure to talk to you. And I appreciate the heart that you put into your work. I can tell that you're driven by passion, and that I can very much appreciate.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate it. And some people might say, some of these are a stretch, but the further you go down the path of truth, the more you're going to see. You're going to sound crazy to people when it comes down to. It's like this. And I'm going to sum it up very briefly. It's like 9/11. Once you figure out 9/11 was not what we're told, and other events, I'm not going to get into those events, but other events are not what we're told. And then people watch, say, for example, other events on TV, but they believe them because they can't, the human mind can't say, well, everything can't be fake. That's their initial reaction. So, they cannot go there because it's too insane, too crazy. But we live in a crazy world. And I play the lyrics from that song from Madonna from that one song called American Life, when she says, I'm living out the American dream. And I just realized that nothing is as it seems. And it's very true. Again, I talk about truth and entertainment, lies in the news. And that's this world that's Freemasonry, the world of opposites, the world of duality.